And that's what I strive to do. And it's not just playing the golf course, it's experiencing the people that like are there every day. The superintendent, the head professional, the GM, the waitress, the halfway house person, the caddy. All these people create an environment and an experience that is unique. And that is the string I really like to pull on.
Jake Stoutland here on the Content Clubhouse podcast, best known for taking viewers inside some of the game's most prestigious and fascinating clubs. But your content goes beyond rankings, bucket list golf, or any of that, with a focus on architecture, culture, history, and the subtle details that make the best clubs, in your words, truly elevated. So Jake, I appreciate you coming on and carving some time out of what I know is a really busy schedule to chop it up a little bit.
Yeah, never too busy for you, Nate. Thank you. Very thoughtful intro. You're certainly a loyal, I guess, in the modern day follower sense. So thanks.
Yeah, man. Well, I really want to dive into, again, you're kind of in a very unique and interesting lane in the golf media landscape that we're all sort of inhabiting here. But before we get into that, I would just love to hear, as a guy coming from what I've got to imagine is a pretty football dominant household, how did the golf obsession start for you?
My dad's a football coach, and we moved a lot growing up as a family. And I got a taste of it in Michigan. I spent kindergarten to sixth grade in Michigan, and I think I decided I want to do like a summer golf camp in Michigan, and I enjoyed it. I love being at the golf course. And in the middle of sixth grade, my dad took a job at the University of Miami, and we moved to South Florida. And that was a tough move for a kid coming from Michigan. It just very different culture, and I did not fit in. And I don't know. I think my parents just said, "Hey, why don't you give golf a try?" And that became the place that I found total solace in. And in the meantime of just bringing me happiness, I became obsessed with the game. So I was just a range warrior. I was out there every day trying to perfect my game, really not very non-analytical, and I've turned into a little bit of an analytical player now, but back then it was just hit the ball as good as I could. And so that's how it started.
Very cool. Yeah, as you mentioned, Pop's being a football coach, which is definitely true, but putting it maybe a little humbly, longtime offensive line coach at the highest levels in college football, and of course with the Philadelphia Eagles, where you're kind of now still in the Philly area. So looking at kind of your style of content, again, as I mentioned, very unique in this space. Not really anybody else in what is an ever increasingly busy sector of the internet, that kind of being golf content. Yours is a brand or a voice that is kind of on its own. Not a ton of people doing exactly what it is that you're doing. So with that in mind, I guess, how did you approach that first idea, like going from being golf obsessed to, hey, let me make content out of this? And how did you kind of land on that voice that you've curated so well over the last few years?
Yeah, I never sat down and wrote a business plan or anything. I never thought this could ever be a business. I obviously, like you said, I'm really interested in this stuff. And in my prior career, I was in real estate, and I found a lot of value in researching the really successful people, investors, real estate investors that came before me. And then what I used to do was I would pretty much write my own notes of the most valuable things I learned from that person. And then I started posting on Twitter, and people are like, "Whoa, there's a lot of value in here." And so for me, it was both tremendously valuable and tremendously, valuable and educational. And so then I was like, okay, I love golf. Why don't I kind of do a similar thing with golf? And I made a video. I think it was on the Bridge. I believe his name is Bob Rubin, and he founded the Bridge, which is in Bridgehampton, New York. And I kind of did a story on how that place came to be. It's a really cool story, and it was the first time I ever really spoke to a camera. and it went real fast. And there was never a time where I was really posting into the ether. Like day one, it started resonating, and so I just kept doing it, and I kept looking into it. And what I realized is this like golf history storytelling was a bit of a inefficient market if you use economic terms. Like a lot of these stories either lived in like, I have some books behind me, but they lived in these books, and there's only a small group of people in the world that really go into these pro shops and buy these books, and those people who do love it, but they weren't really sharing it widely, so it was inefficiently being shared, or they didn't even exist in books and they were just in people's head. And so I found a way of, one, finding the interesting stories, and two, telling them in a way that was really easy to digest in a video media format. And yeah, it just took off. And like I said, I never sat down. It just kind of organically happened. And then when you start doing stuff, you look for feedback, kind of playing traffic, I call it. And you start getting people say, hey, like, you have a really good eye for little stuff. Like you said, I observed that, and I was like, oh, maybe I do. And I also, an advantage I have is I was able, like, I wasn't just talking about places I'd never been. Like, I'd been to these places and I had firsthand experience, that's an advantage I had, and I was aware of that. So, when I kept going to those places, I was wide-eyed and trying to observe every little thing, and then finding ways to respectfully and discreetly, not totally discreet, but like, there's a level of a nuance here where, these private clubs are private for a reason. So you don't want to share stuff that's totally confidential, but there's a lot of stuff that you can share that's totally above board. And so I kind of found a way to walk the tightrope and do that in a respectful way.
Yeah. You mentioned the Bridgehampton story, which is really cool. In others, so many of like the unknown histories of some of these clubs that you've told, and a lot of stories, to your point, that again have not been told, or certainly at least not through social media before. I'm curious, as somebody who seems to take far more interest in why a place matters or how a club became what it is today, like what are some, in terms of looking at the types of stories to tell, how do you identify new ones to research or dive into, or do they just kind of come at you organically?
No, early on it was just, it was a lot. It's hand-to-hand combat early on. Like, it was hard. I'm really going deep into very esoteric internet things and trying to find some thread to pull on. And, it almost starts, I would say, if anybody's looking, like, you start at the top 100 rankings, and then you find courses that are interesting to you, and then you try to look into the history. Most clubs have a history page on their website. That's the baseline. Look at that history. And for me, it's like, you need some type, it's just basic storytelling. Like, you need a hero, you need somebody who stepped up to the bat, you need a problem, they need to have overcome some obstacle, you need to have them solve that obstacle, and then you need kind of a payoff. And that's in very elementary terms, but that's essentially what I look for when I go onto that first page of like the history. Does it have some part of that? And if it has something, then I go deeper. And the internet's your friend. And I think, being our age, we grew up with the internet, and we understand a bit how to like research and go really deep if we want to. And yeah, I've leaned into that.
To that effect, I guess I already kind of had this teed up as a question, but especially in light of what you just kind of described, like that true, almost thinking of it not only as a storyteller, but really as a, like, stories at its very core, right? I mean, that kind of basic model you just described is more or less how we as a species have pretty much been doing this for as long as we've been doing it. But with that in mind, would you consider yourself more aligned, I guess, with a filmmaker rather than, say, like a golf YouTuber? Like, if somebody were to say, hey, you're that guy on golf YouTube, like, is there, Do you make that distinction between the two? Do you feel more aligned with, I guess, an art form rather than what we tend to think of as kind of social media content?
I mean, it's hard. I don't know the answer to that question. I don't see myself as an influencer. Like that term, well, first, I think it has a negative connotation. And second, I don't resonate with that word. I definitely resonate with the word storyteller. I feel like that's what I am. And yes, I am totally an amateur storyteller. I'm an amateur videographer. I'm an amateur, really everything I'm doing, I'm amateur at. But like I just told you, there is everything you could possibly want to learn on the internet or around us in today's day and age. And if you seek that information out, you can learn it and you can do better with it. And I found when you post it to the internet, you get really rapid feedback. And if you can take feedback and then take what's valuable and then find a way to make it better, then I feel like I'm turning into a miniature storyteller or a miniature videographer. I mean, I tell you what, I've learned a heck of a lot about this stuff, and I'm a lot more educated than I was 2 years ago. When I first started, I knew nothing, and I just put up a camera, put it in auto, and just snap my fingers and record. Now it's gotten more robust, but yeah, to answer the question, I certainly resonate with the term storyteller more than I do, YouTuber.
Yeah. Well, I'd love to dive into your process, right? Because I think while you do capture a lot of content on the golf course that looks somewhat similar to, your Brian Bros or your Grant Horvats or whoever, kind of camera behind you hitting the shots, you're also capturing so much else. But to backtrack to like what that first step looks like, I'm just curious, when you've identified a course that you want to profile in some way, or I guess you tell me how that works. Are you finding ones and then reaching out to them? Is it, I know you have plenty of existing relationships, but what is it, kind of chicken then egg, or vice versa in terms of how you go about visiting a place and crafting content?
Well, when I first video I ever did, it was like, who's going to say yes that I would want to watch a video at that course? That was like baseline. And you do it once, you do a good job, and then you get more yeses. But like as going into I'm going to private golf clubs pretty much exclusively. And yeah, those are places that typically are not used to having cameras there. So for me, the early obstacle was proving to the people at that club and the leadership that I am going to respect their golf club, respect their membership, and do a job that puts them in a positive light. So like that was step one. Now it's just totally flipped. I feel like I've done a lot of great work and I have a lot of great opportunities. And so now it's like, go back. I just did a video. I just filmed at North Jersey Country Club, and I kind of sought that one out because for me, it has two initial things that I look for: the golf course architect and the clubhouse architect. Those are two things that are really interesting to me. And North Jersey Country Club has Walter J. Travis, golf architect, who I am a massive fan of. He does not have a million courses, so when you find one, they're usually very unique. So that was one. And two, the clubhouse is a Wendahack, which he is a very, very well-known golf clubhouse architect from the Northeast, did Wingfoot, Ridgewood, North Jersey Country Club, and many more. And that building is at pretty much as he, I mean, not totally, but mostly as he built it. So those two things on the headline, I was like, interesting. Then I'm from Philly. I don't hear a lot about North Jersey Country Club. I know up in North Jersey they talk about it, but like if you're in anywhere outside that kind of New York metro, you probably don't know about it. I just went there. Oh my gosh. Like I've played a lot of golf in my life. That is a place where you say, how do I not know about this place? And so for me, when I find a place like that, I'm like, I would love to share this. People, even though they may not get the ability to play the course, a lot of people value the ability to digitally experience it, and they appreciate that. And that's what I strive to do. And it's not just playing the golf course, it's experiencing the people that like are there every day. The superintendent, the head professional, the GM, the waitress, the halfway house person, the caddy, all these people create a an environment and an experience that is unique. And that is the string I really like to pull on.
Well, I'm curious as it relates to, you talk about the private nature of that, right? And if I were to, as a viewer, describe what makes your content singular among a lot of other golf content creators, is ultimately most of the time they're going to places that the average person can go play, or at least has the ability to do so without jumping through too many hoops. Whereas you, again, are going to places, as you described, that are private and are private for a reason. And working in the golf media space as I do, at Buffalo Group, we work with some private clubs for sure. But by and large, most of the clubs I work with are public, because for the most part, private clubs aren't really in the PR marketing game, right? Like, that's just not a lane that they inhabit. They just don't necessarily want that work. So I'm curious, have you bumped into that at all? And if so, how have you kind of overcome that, or what your experience has been like kind of pitching what it is that you do to some of these private clubs?
Yeah, I thought the exact same thing that you just communicated early on. I was like, these people don't want to be talked about. Not true. I'll say it. Not true. Every member at a golf club wants to go to somewhere and be like, oh, you're a member there? I've heard incredible stuff about that. It's not a great feeling when you go and people are like, I don't know that place. Like, I mean, it's not a terrible feeling, but I'll tell you what, it's an exquisite feeling when somebody goes, you're a member there? I saw a video, or I heard a story, or I read an article. That place looks incredible. So just that is valuable. Okay, now you think about, how does a private golf club exist? Well, they have members that pay money to be there. Well, unfortunately, there's a lifespan for a member. Sorry. Okay, so that door does need to get backfilled. And it's not, some clubs, like we think of the top 100. Yeah, those places most of them have waiting lists for years. But outside of that, I mean, everybody could use another person on their waiting list, and every club could retain one more member. I mean, they would all say, I would value that. And if they can or if they can be a part of a piece of media that paints them in a light that improves their perception of the world, they're interested in that. And that's what I've understood. That's what I've learned. Nobody's not interested in that. I mean, like Augusta National, they're interested in that. They host a tournament that started as that. If you look back at the history, that club was struggling. Nate, you probably know this better than I do, but they were going through it back in the day. And Clifford Roberts came up, or Bobby John, I don't know who came up with the idea, I think, but to host the tournament, and then, the rest is history. There's a lot in between, but yes, that's the answer.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you mentioned that too, because I guess the idea of good publicity, yes, but to talk about the lifespans, certainly, of members, which we've both, I'm sure, encountered some who appear to be closer to the end of that ticking clock too. I'm just, with the medium that you're in, which is still very new. It's not as new to us who've kind of grown up with it a little bit, but like, I just imagine you trying to like explain YouTube to somebody. Like, does that happen much at all?
Sometimes, yeah, I'm still working on that. But typically how this works is you have one person that's kind of a champion of it at the club that does understand it, that does have real say, and they champion it. And kind of it's like, hey, I'll fall on the sword if this goes bad. And that's how I've found it to work. But it's very rare for me to go to a club and they have no earthly idea what they're getting into. Like there's always somebody there that's like, no, this is what's going to happen. And they kind of communicate it to the greater membership and leadership. But yeah, I mean, I was just at a place yesterday and like the members are like, what? Like, I don't understand. And then another member chimed in. They're like, oh, you're about to see. So it is, yes, there's certainly a difficulty in communicating to different generations.
Well, the flip side of that same coin, I guess, is in an era where golf is more popular than it's ever been, and I think you, me, everybody who works in this game is benefiting from that in many ways, and some would argue too that there are certainly downsides to that, be that difficulty to find tee times or general kind of struggles with it, with whether you want to call it an overcrowding or what have you. But I think by and large, everybody pretty much in agreement that more people playing golf is a good thing. But again, in an age where it's more popular than it's ever been, arguably certainly more accessible than it's ever been, and yet, I guess, how do you reconcile that kind of idea to what you do, which is to share the stories of places, which again, I think we all agree are very cool and very, like, you know, whether people get to experience them for themselves in person ever or not, it's still interesting. I guess for any critics who might say like, oh, you know, Jake is not a man of the people with this, or, you know, this private club content isn't for me. I guess, how do you reconcile two kind of opposite ends of the spectrum? You seem to be inhabiting kind of the middle of a Venn diagram there between golf social media and kind of this private club culture.
Yeah, I'd say if you think it's not for you, then I guess it's not for you. I'm not trying to be for everybody. Like I battled this early on because I'd make these lists and they'd be all private courses and people like, well, I can't play it. And then I had a whole and other people like get it. And I was like, you know, sometimes you can't be everything for everyone. And yeah, like if I'm not the person that's going to go to whatever, the local course down the road and tell you everything about it, I also wouldn't do the best job of doing that. And, you know, I hear myself talking and how lucky am I to be able to profile all these private clubs. But, you know, people think that they can't play these places. I didn't grow up at a country club. I didn't step foot into a country club until, I don't know, 4 or 5 years of golfing. And I think it was at a tournament because I signed up for a tournament and I, you know, broke all the rules. You know, I wore a hat inside, or I put my shoes on in the parking lot. And you learn these things as a young kid. But what I've learned now is if there's a will, there's a way. You can send an email. You can, like, there's a million ways to find yourself into one of these places. And I get a lot of comments like, there's no way I could play that. There's a way you could play that course. There's absolutely a way you could play that course. So don't let the private nature of somewhere discourage you from, like, knocking on the door.
Yeah. Well, I wouldn't, you know, I'd be remiss if we didn't kind of dive into some of the cooler places you've been and some of the places you've found especially unique. You talk about architecture. I know that's a huge, you know, theme of a lot of the work that you do, but I'm also curious, before we really jump into kind of some of your favorite places, architects, and that sort of thing, as someone, you talked about kind of how your golf game has changed a little bit over the years. As you've grown more of an appreciation for the architectural side of things, like, has that changed how you play golf or how you experience a golf course in terms of the way, I guess, you think your way around a place or looking for certain things? If you know, hey, this is a Donald Ross or this is a McKenzie or what have you, how much has that changed, I guess, your literal golf experience?
Yeah, well, it's changed. I wasn't so into architecture until I started making these videos and I started understanding how these places came to be. I just didn't think past the golf course. I just show up, play the golf course. If the grass is green and it's mowed nice, I'm like, oh, this is a great golf course. And then I started playing golden age golf courses in the Philadelphia area. And I was surrounded by people who had an appreciation for this stuff. And I started asking questions. I go, this was wooded land once upon a time. And somebody came out here and took out a pencil and created this out of literal thin air. And you're like, whoa, that's really cool, really cool. They decided the routing should be this way. And so when you start thinking like that, it becomes really cool. And then when you start understanding these guys and girls, and these architects, you can pick up similarities amongst them. And you see certain types of holes that are, oh, that reminds me of that hole that they did over there. And that becomes so fun. I mean, I was just talking about Walter Travis, and I was at North Jersey, and I played Scranton before. I'm like, oh, I get more of who Walter Travis is because I look at these greens and I'm like, oh, he does this with that. Or I live in Philadelphia and William Flynn's everywhere here. And, there's so many things that he does that he took places. He wasn't a template guy. He didn't just pick up a hole and put it there, but he used a lot of similar techniques. And so for me, it's been awesome to learn this stuff kind of on the fly. Again, amateur. Like, I don't really know what I'm talking about. I just see with my eyes. I'm like, oh, got it. I see that, but I don't know why yet. I'm learning.
Yeah, I was going to ask, like, early on, because again, I've experienced something similar, and I haven't done nearly the level of research I imagine you have. But the idea, did you ever have an experience of like, yeah, I'm really enjoying this golf course, but I can't really like put a finger on exactly like why that is? Like, has that happened to you, and are you starting to kind of, I guess, maybe be able to put a better finger on like, oh, that's because this is more thought provoking, and that's as a result of this, that, or the other thing? Just curious, have you kind of felt that evolution in real time at all?
I have that feeling often. I'm not sure I can put a finger on the answer to that question, and I'm not sure I ever will. There's a famous, I think it's Louis Armstrong had an awesome quote. I think it's him, but he said, somebody asked me, he's like, "What's great music?" And he said, I don't know what great music is, but I know when I start tapping my toe, I like it. And I'm pretty much the same way. Like, I'll get out to a course that was built yesterday and be like, you know what? I really like this. Or because I'm traditionally a golden age guy, I'm just kind of, I like that stuff. I like age. And I would say that's probably a common thread is if you have a golden age golf course that has been respected to how it was designed, which is hard to find today because a lot of these places have evolved over the years and, they've changed a lot of things. But I love that the golden age, like true to their architecture. But there's not one thing. I've been out to other places where I'm tapping my toe. So can't answer your question, but when I start tapping my toe, I know I like it.
Yeah, I like that. I like that. Well, before I get you out of here, I would be very interested to hear. Again, you're in the Philly area. Of course, Aronimink just hosted the PGA Championship. By the time this probably comes out, that'll have been a few weeks. But so many great courses up in that area. So many great ones up in the Northeast that you've checked out. But leave us with a little knowledge here. What's maybe one you mentioned North Jersey? Is there another that kind of surprised you, or you get in there and you're like, whoa, this is not exactly what I was expecting, but it's how have I not heard of this?
Ooh, how long we got? Yeah, I mean, I mentioned Scranton, Country Club of Scranton. That's kind of in a location that is, like I used the word earlier, inefficient. Not the whole world goes through Scranton, but that is a spectacular golf course. In the Philadelphia area, I had lived here a while. I hadn't played Manufacturers until 2 years ago. Manufacturers, that is a great golf course. William Flynn, the great holes there are as good as anywhere. They have some fantastic golf holes. Um, Lancaster as well. That's a little bit outside the main Philly area. Exquisite golf course. And then trying to think of, wow, yeah, I mean, you want underrated. You want places that people haven't heard of. Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, those most of those, especially like Scranton, fall on that for sure.
Yeah, Sakonnet. That's in Little Compton, Rhode Island. Donald Ross, right on the water, right on the Sakonnet River. Low key place, walking only, no caddies, very comfortable walk, a gem.
Yeah, very cool. Well, is there again, I got to get one more Eagles content in there. Again, as a kind of I'm an NFL guy, but much more on the college side. But I definitely have an appreciation for what we call the Philadelphia Bulldogs down here as a proud UGA grad and all the guys up there. But being kind of tied to that scene a little bit, and especially knowing the Philly golf scene as you do, I'm curious, like, where are these guys? If I were to say, yeah, I'm trying to see Jake Elliott in his Friday Skins game, are these guys playing the Marions, the Aronimink, or whatever? Where are a lot of those guys, to your knowledge, teeing it up at?
Oh, Jake Elliott's absolutely playing the top tier. He's in the top tier. He's a great golfer. He knows he's in the group. It's kind of sporadic. These guys are there's some over in Jersey and South Jersey, and then there's some, Nolan Smith's at my golf club. He's a Georgia Bulldog, great guy. He's learning the game of golf and is loving it. But it's not it's kind of spread out. But yeah, Elliott, he's the best player on the team, and a great guy, great golfer, great athlete. And yeah, he's played the places. He knows.
It's always it's like, I guess, like, funny. I guess it's like, oh yeah, the kicker. Like, I guess that kind of makes sense. He would be a great golfer. Like, there's just a part of me that's like, obviously I'm sure there's some good big fellas out there, but it's harder for me to imagine like Jordan Mailata or one of these other just mountainous human beings like having a great golf swing. But not to say it's not possible. But or Jordan Davis. Like, I'd love to see him do it.
Yeah, no, I don't think that would go well. But Jake Elliott is, I mean, he's just a awesome athlete. He's great at everything. You put him, you make him bowl, you make him play tennis. He is like the best one at everything. So he's just a great athlete.
Very cool. Well, again, really appreciate the time. One quick thing before we get you out of here, give you a chance to talk a little bit about yourself here. What are some upcoming things you're excited about? Maybe some videos coming down the pipeline, or other trips you're looking forward to throughout the rest of the year.
Yeah, I was just at the U.S. Open Media Day, and I played Shinnecock, which is a place I hold in the highest regard. I mean, that the aura of stepping onto that property is unlike anything I've ever experienced. So I just filmed there, which is never ever a thing that would happen except if the US Open was there. That video will be coming out in a few weeks, which I am just editing the footage, and it's so cool for me to see that. So that's one. And then later this summer, the US Amateur is at Marion, right in my backyard, the world's greatest amateur golf event. And I will be out there for Media Day and also doing a video there, which, when I started this whole thing, those are two courses that if you would have told me I'd be filming videos out there, I would have just been over the moon. And now it's reality. So I feel really like I've created one of like the coolest jobs in the world. And I'm so grateful to be able to do this, and thankful for all the people that support me. So,
well, that's awesome stuff. And folks can follow along and check those out by following Jake, Instagram, YouTube, everywhere else at Jake Stoutland, I believe at stout.land on Instagram. But yeah, Jake, again, really appreciate the time. Looking forward to seeing some of this content, and good catching up with you.
Thank you, Nate. Appreciate it.